This morning on BRN, how can I make ends meet without asking my partner to go back to work? Part two of our conversation, we're going to welcome back to the program senior financial journalist Maurie Backman. Maurie, great to see you. Thanks for joining us again this morning for part two of our conversation.
You're welcome, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, so I think you laid out what I think a lot of American families are going through, especially if they have very, very young children. They've got to make it work maybe on two incomes. They've got to have some daycare. But how do you make it work, Maurie, if you want to have one of the partners stay home with the child, rear the child or children? You can't afford the daycare. How do you make it work? What are some tips?
So I can tell you from firsthand experience, because there was a point where we really did have to make it work on one income. I was not going to put three young children in daycare at the same time. So we decided that, I would stay home with the kids and I would freelance when I could. And let me tell you, Jeff, that back then when I had, twin, 6-week olds and a toddler, I was not doing very much work. So we really had to kind of arrange all of our finances to get by on my husband's paycheck alone. And this is the first thing we did when we realized we were going to be in that situation. We sat down like nerds on a computer, at a computer, we set up a budget. Okay, we opened an Excel spreadsheet. We said, all right, these are our costs. We looked at our credit cards. We looked at our bank statements. We said, all right, this is what the mortgage is. I mean, we knew what our mortgage was, but but some of the things we really didn't know, right? Like we didn't know exactly what we were spending on groceries. And granted, there's no exact number because it'll obviously fluctuate, but we didn't have a great sense of what that number was. We didn't know exactly what we were spending on average on like electricity and heat. And it's like, all right, well, and we've got cable and maybe we can cancel one of the streaming services because, we're busy with the kids anyway. We don't really have time to sit there and watch it. So we sat down and we went through this process of just mapping out all of our expenses and seeing what the number came to, and then making sure that we were not going to go over based on what my husband's take-home pay amounted to. And, a lot of people groan when you tell them, oh, you got a budget, you got a budget. Look, I'm going to tell you that if you've got two incomes, or even if you got one income, and with certainty, you're not overspending your paycheck, you're saving money every month, fine. You don't want to budget, don't budget. But for us, we knew that our household income was going to be taking a very big hit with me not returning to work. So we had to sit down and crunch those numbers. And then what we did was, all right, so there's a two-parter here, right? Not only did we create that budget, but then we sort of started to revisit it every month and say, okay, well, we're covering our bills. We're not in poor shape, but are there things here that we can eliminate? And then on the flip side of that, we kind of prioritized our sanity a little bit during those early days of having twin infants and a toddler. Okay, my husband's exhausted from working all day and still being kept up at night with crying babies, and I'm exhausted and I'm a mess. And hey, I do have a couple of hours today, maybe to freelance in between naps and whatnot. I'll just not sleep myself, And then we started to prioritize, well, let's work in some room in our budget for expenses that'll make our lives easier. And I think, Jeff, that's such an important thing for parents of young children to do, especially when you're deep in the trenches of infanthood and toddlerhood, So we actually allocated a little bit of money back then to a cleaning person to come in and help out every couple of weeks, just to not only give me a break, but frankly, so I didn't have to worry that oh, I've got screaming infants in the crib and my little toddler is, romping around while I'm trying to vacuum and he's pulling the cord out and he's tripping over it was just madness in my house. So we prioritized that. We actually said that first year, we're not going to allocate money to a vacation. We're going to take that line item out of our budget. And instead, this year, we're just going to focus on things that can help us survive the year and make our lives easier. So that was thing number one.
Yeah, and Maurie, let me just jump in and ask you about, these are kind of challenging economic times. How do you account for, or how did you account for the variability? Because maybe prices go up on things. Eggs here, we're dealing with the avian flu. Eggs go up. So how did you deal with some of that variability that, look, you have to have that in your budget?
Well, that's why
But you've got lower discretionary income. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why honestly, this budget thing wasn't just a one-time thing. We actually sat down at the end of every month and kind of, we made it our sad little date night because we weren't going anywhere anyway with such young kids at home. That was date night. We sat down, we maybe popped open a bottle of Cabernet and said, okay, we're gonna sit with the budget. And all right, yeah, now food's costing a little bit more, or even, where we live in the Northeast, you're going to have months where your heating bills are really expensive and maybe then your electric bill's lower because you're not running the air and then vice versa. And you can get on one of those payment plans. We don't, we just we would roll with it. And so, you make adjustments. You definitely have to make adjustments. Here's another thing I would definitely recommend though. This is important too. And I want to be very clear here that not everyone's going to be in this situation to be able to do this. But in our case, with my husband still working, he had a 401k through his company, and his company offered a match. And it's very common for employers offering 401ks to also give you some kind of match. It might be a preset number, it might be a percentage of your salary, but one thing we definitely made sure to do during that time, even though it made it tougher, was we made sure that my husband was contributing enough to that 401k to claim that match, because that's free money, Jeff. And I hate to see anyone give up free money. So I would definitely recommend that for people who are now in the situation where you're adjusting to a one income lifestyle, if it is possible, it will not always be, but if it is possible, make that a priority too. Make sure to contribute enough to your 401k to get that match, because you're doing two things here. Number one, you are saving something for your future, which is important, and you have to do it. But number two, you're not passing up what could be a free $2,500, $3,000, $5,000 a month. You don't want to give that up. So that's really something I would say try to prioritize.
Yeah, that really good idea if you can do it. So you talked about the budget. Let me ask you about. We've got about 2 minutes left, Maurie. Credit cards. I want to talk about credit cards because how the credit card debt is through the roof. People are carrying large balances. How should they play a role? Because the tendency is to say, I need this thing and I want to charge it on my credit card, and I don't care if I carry a balance because, I need it.
I mean, listen, in an ideal world, I would tell people not to do that, because you're just going to, accrue interest on that credit card, and it's probably going to be expensive. But we have to be realistic here, okay? If you have a month, if you're on a single income and you have a month where you have an unplanned expense, you might have to whip out that credit card. But what I would say in that situation is, first of all, try to at all times have access to a 0% interest credit card. You're not going to get 0% interest forever, but you'll typically get it for a good 12 to 15 months, so that, if you have a car repair that's $800 and it's just not in your budget that month and you don't have the savings for it, which is the case for a lot of people, you put it on the 0% card, you at least get a break from accruing interest for a little bit of time. And ideally, if you still have a good number of months left between when the intro period ends, you could come up with some kind of payoff plan. Like in that situation, I'd say, all right, so maybe you're a stay-at-home parent, with your young kids, and your spouse is the only one working. Your spouse is on salary, they can't grow their paycheck. But if you want to get this credit card balance paid off, maybe one of you, I don't know, it sucks, okay, but a couple of nights a week, go drive for like a ride share company or something, just to get that credit card balance paid off before you start to accrue interest. Just because you don't want to get into that trap. And look, sometimes it's unavoidable, but if you can avoid it, you're going to be better off.
Well, really good insight. It's a predicament that so many couples are in, but I think, there's a little bit of a prescription. It's the toughest job, I think, on the planet is being a parent. So kudos to you, Maurie, for raising 3 children, including a set of twins. Hats golf clap to you. Hats off to you. Maurie Backman, great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Polls, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.